Hey guys, Justin here. Quick note, be sure to be on the lookout for week 13 content because I'm going to have a huge announcement where I'm going to be announcing some new content and some new guides that I think will help you guys out a lot. Otherwise, I would really appreciate it if you left a like on this video if this helped you out because that's the #1 way to help me out. Alright, let's get right to the lap.
Kind of coming off the corner lower.
Yep.
Like you're, dropping it. Okay.
I agree with that.
Well, it could help to not scrape the wall in 3 and 4 on the. This is looking like it might be a slow night.
I mean, nobody really runs IRP in my experience.
So
22.721.
Alright, so on to the qualifying lap here, and as always we'll get that run up from the top. So just like many short tracks, you start up by the wall and then kind of turn down, let the car turn off the wall, and then make a really straight exit, try to get your wheel pointed straight as quick as possible, and then you're able to really launch and get a really fast run up into turn 1 here. And that really does matter because unlike a lot of short tracks, this is a fairly sizable straightaway that you'll lose time on if you don't have the right speed. So anyways, there are a couple ways to approach one. A lot of people were trying the high line because that was kind of similar to what the trucks ran for hot lap. But in the Arca car, I really like this line along the first seam here. You just kind of treat that first seam like the apron, and you do that in both the qualifying and the race. And for the qualifying, you want to get it down to the seam as quick as possible, and then run a little bit of a diamond so that it comes off the seam just slightly, maybe like this much, and then drive it back down and kind of force it when you're on the hot lap. So I get it down early, get my left to right on the seam, you let it slide up maybe a half of a lane, maybe even less. It was even less, honestly. And then once the car starts turning back down, that's when you pick up the throttle. So you see I'm dragging the brake, using it to kind of rotate the car, and then the moment that it starts turning back down the hill, that's when you apply the throttle. So let's look at it again. So throttle into the corner, big stab, bring it down to a drag. Drag, 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 drag. Now it's turning back down, back partial on the throttle. I see I hiccuped a little bit there. That wasn't, when I picked up the throttle, I didn't like what I was feeling in that instant, so I had to double clutch it. But normally you want to have that happen the first time. So I lost a little bit of time there. But now we pick up the throttle to half, and then I like to cut through that seam a little bit, and then full throttle it up to the wall. And that's a pretty good 1 and 2 there. I actually had a couple better laps than this that I forgot to record, but they were only marginally better. This is the same idea. So, same idea into 3. We saw that brake stab into a drag. And then on that drag, we wrap it around the seam. It's really the same idea. Same idea. They might feel a little bit different as corners like this tend to, but you really want to wrap that left all along this seam. I kind of tried dipping my left into this zone a little bit below the seam, and it seemed to not be so bad, but a really consistent line is just to keep it on the seam. And then same idea. So you see, it's kind of hard to see with my hands there. I know a couple people tell me not to use the steering wheel, but I'm just so used to it. I'll make this tiny apex. So I'll go up the hill like to here, and then that's when I come back down. You kind of just keep tabs on your car to make sure that it wants to keep driving up the hill and not really forcing it. So I'm cranking the wheel as it's coming up the hill, and then I get it. Once I can feel it right here is when I started to feel it come back down the hill, and that's when I picked up the throttle. So you drag the brake until you start feeling it come back down the hill, and then you put the throttle to partial, and then once you're able to open up your wheel, you add more throttle, and then once you're able to get your wheel straight, you go full throttle, and then in that order. So brake drag, until you hit the part where your car wants to turn back down the hill. Then you go to half. Then from half, you go to 3/4 when you can open up your wheel a little bit. And then when you can open up your wheel all the way, that's when you go a full. And then you're able to, it gets a little loose off of 4, so it takes some practice, but you're able to carry some decent speed off the corner while also maintaining a very quick center, much quicker than you would be able to if you're up by the wall. All right, so now let's go to the race. All right, so first race done here. Finished 6th, not the best showing, but okay considering we started 8th, and this track is very hard to pass on. You kind of see nobody made up too many spots for where they started, so qualifying is going to be insanely important here. So a couple things to note. I had a different idea of what to do for the tire saving line here, because you're going to have to actually care about your right front in this car at this track. So let's see here. So what we were doing is, let's go to lap 3 or so. So I was trying the same as the qualifying line, where I just kind of ride it along that seam. But I learned very quickly that that wasn't going to work. Even though it was keeping up and I felt like I was saving, everyone else up front was running this high arcing line that got to the wall. So let's watch the cockpit here. So they drive it in deep and then kind of drag the brake up to the wall, let it rotate, and then just drive it back down the track on exit. Now, how is that different from me? I don't drive it in quite as deep. I brake earlier. I get to the seam, but there's too much wheel input there. There's just far too much wheel input. And you can get a lot less wheel input by diving in a little more, getting used to not being able to, or being able to keep it off the wall, and just let it kind of steer itself, almost like a very slow Dover, kind of. You just kind of let the car get to you, and this was saving them a lot of right front that paid dividends about 30 or 40 laps into the race. And I started trying it, but you see, I'm still turning too much. I gotta drive it in a little deeper and let my brake do the work for me. So that's something I gotta work on for next race, and I am gonna run next race. But that was basically it. Not much passing after the first 5 or 6 laps. You can see here Derek got the move done by he got into the wall a little bit and he just dove it in and was able to clear. And that's about the only way you can pass here, honestly. If the top guy is not making any mistakes, it's going to be very hard. So the job of you below the guy to making the pass is to make their job as hard as possible and try to get them into the wall without putting them in the wall, if you know what I mean. So that was a good race. I think we're going to put those ideas to the test, and we'll see if we can do better in the second race. All right. So the second race went very poorly. We wrecked out of it. So I wanted to show you what I learned from the first race, but because I was unable to show it in the second race, I'm just going to show it in a test session. So the line that I initially described in the first race will get the job done, especially in the late run where no one can pass anyone, this high line up here. But this isn't really the best way to go about it. The way that I saw some of the fastest guys doing it was they kind of whip their car into the corner on the seam and let it slide up, and then without forcing it back down the hill, you pick up the throttle and then you get off the corner. The same idea here, you whip it onto the seam, you let it slide up a little bit, you let it turn back down the hill on its own. And this is a very, very good long run line because you're using really little wheel input. Look how little wheel I'm using right now. And I didn't wait long enough on the throttle there, so that wasn't quite as good. But get down to the seam, you let it slip up a little bit, and then without forcing the wheel too much, you get it back down the track on the exit. Now let's see if we can get 1 and 2 a little bit better here. On the brake, get it to the seam, let it slide up a little bit, and then wait a little bit. And you see I'm able to drive it down because I waited that extra little instant. That's 2/10 right there. You see here, whip it down to the seam, ride the brake, let the car turn back down.
23.1.
Drove that a little bit there. Down to the seam, up the track, turn back down, drive it off the corner here, so it gets a little loose. So you want it to get loose because this is going to be wearing right front naturally, this track. Unlike a lot of other short tracks, this is a kind of an exception. And it's all about patience. If you're not getting run over in the back, you want to just... So I almost call this a Dover line. This feels kind of Doverish without the banking. You get that diamond. And the fastest guys are doing the diamond, and the tier 2 guys are doing that high line run. But this is what apparently was working the best on the long run for people. They're really gapping everyone at the end of the race particularly. And what you don't want to do is, see how much I have to turn the wheel to keep it on the seam like this? Yeah, it gains time. I gained a lot of time. But I only gained less than a tenth there, and that was a lot extra wear. Look how much I have to turn the wheel to keep it on the seam. That's so much wheel, right? Then you can kind of open up there, but look, it's a faster time. So instead of doing that, 23.0, we only lose less than a tenth, and we're barely using any wheel. We just let it come back down the track on its own. I under drove that a little bit. I'm gonna try to do it right here. Carry momentum in the corner, ride the brake. The car turned back down the hill on its own, and that turn was virtually the same as the one before where I was burning all that tire. So you guys kind of see the difference? Looking on the orange on the wheel is a very good reference point for that. And you see how I'm using not much turn to get this rotation in the corner. And people are kind of doing the same up top, but towards the late run, just the amount of speed that you carry up there to keep up your time is also bad on the tires. So you see kind of a late apex, slide up the track, keep patient, and then drive it back down the hill, all without steering too much. So this is a bit of a long run tutorial beyond what I did in my race, and I wish I was kind of able to execute in that race, but honestly I don't know if it would have made much of a difference with how hard it is to pass here. So really work on your qualifying, guys. That'll be honestly the most important lap of your race, is your qualifying lap. But anyways, I hope you all had a good time watching this, and I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all on the track.